Hi there, this is Dylis Guyan from DylisGuyan.com, international sales and marketing leader, coach and speaker. And I help business owners and salespeople who sell to bigger businesses to become the trusted expert, to be well positioned in their field and have clients coming to them. And today I have got the most amazing guest who is going to talk to us more about that very subject. So I would like to introduce you to Mark Schaefer, and I'll just give you a little bit of sort of context around Mark. I'd say he's amazing, and that is not an understatement. Mark is a globally recognized keynote speaker, educator, business consultant, and author who blogs at Grow, one of the top marketing blogs of the world. And you can actually see behind Mark his 6 books that he's written. And I have just recently, thank you, Mark, I have just recently bought Known, which is the middle book on the top shelf there, which is amazing. And I'll give you more details on, there we go. Thank you, Mark. Now, Mark, what he doesn't know, in fact, isn't worth knowing. He's worked in global sales, PR, and marketing positions for 30 years. I know he only looks about 25, but he's worked in that position for 30 years. And his clients include both startups and global brands such as Adidas, Johnson & Johnson, Dell, Pfeiffer, the US Air Force, and the UK government. He's got a really prestigious client base. And as I mentioned, he's the author of 6 best-selling books, and his blog is in the top 1% of blogs in the world. And in 2015, he was named as the #2 blogger in the world by Social Media Examiner. And that is no mean feat. There are some really big players in this space, and Mark is among the top 10 marketing influencers in the world. I hope you're getting excited, because I certainly am, to hear more from Mark. But let me tell you just a little bit more. He's been a keynote speaker at conferences, and I was very fortunate earlier this year to be at a conference in Edinburgh where Mark was speaking, and he had the audience enthralled. He had them in the palm of his hand, not just with the content, but the way in which he delivers it. So just amazing. He has also lectured at Oxford University, my hometown, in fact, Princeton, and many other prestigious institutions. And he is also a popular and entertaining commentator, and has appeared on many national television shows, and has written in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. He's been on CNN, BBC, and I could go on. The list is endless. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have this amazing man as my guest today. So a very big welcome to you, Mark Schaefer.
Thank you.
You're so
I feel like I should be getting like the Nobel Prize or something.
Well, I might just have one here as a prize. So Mark, as you know, my audience is business owners and salespeople who sell to bigger businesses. And I know that today we're going to talk about how to become known as the expert, as that trusted advisor in your field, standing out from competitors, becoming that go-to person. So first of all, can you put some context around that?
Well, sure. Here's one of my favorite examples of what it means and why it's important. I was in sales, for probably about a decade before I even moved into marketing. And of course, as a small business owner, I'm in sales every day. So I had the opportunity to bid on the biggest contract of my career. It was with the US Air Force. And because it's a government organization, they had a very extreme vetting process. And part of that was a personal interview. So they interviewed me over Skype. And these officers and these leaders from the procurement office of the Air Force were across this table, and I was sitting like right here, and it was a little, intimidating because I didn't know who these people were, and I started to explain what I did and why I was qualified for this job, by this position. And about 2 minutes into my discussion, the leader from the Air Force interrupted me. And she said, "Oh, Mr. Schaefer, we know who you are. We all read your blog." And at that point, I knew I had the deal because I was known. What I had been, and I didn't know that they knew me. I didn't know them, but they had built an emotional connection to me through my content over a period of years. And that's the opportunity and the power that we have today. There's something about me that resonated with them, that made them love what I'm writing. And perhaps that's why I was even got that far in the first place, because I was known and my competitors weren't. Through my content, I was able to pre-populate the business relationship. I didn't know them, but they knew what I stood for. They knew my values. They knew who I thought. And so how do you scale that? How do you become known in your field? And that's what I studied obsessively, actually, for about 14 months as I was writing this book. And I wanted to know, how do people do it? Can anybody do it? Is it different for different careers or different people, different ages, different parts of the world? And surprisingly, what I found was the answer is no. In fact, every person who became known in their field, whether it was business or art or education or manufacturing, did the same four things. And that became the core of this new book that I wrote.
And it was quite inspiring, in fact, to look at the things that needed to be put in place. Now, I refer to this, you call it known, I call it exposing yourself, metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically speaking.
Of course, yes. And
because this is a family show, and we're going to we want to keep it a family show.
Keep it clean, absolutely. So, you know, when I talk to my clients, and I've worked with thousands of salespeople, and what I see is a sort of a lack of persistency, a lack of consistency.
Yeah.
And those are two big elements, aren't they? In whatever it is you do it consistently. But I see people do a little bit of this, they get into that shiny object syndrome and they jump from one thing to another and they're not consistent with one thing. And then, of course, the results are that they're not known, but neither do they get any get the results from the marketing efforts.
Well, this is a very key issue and a very key question. And it's one of the things I personally learned from writing this book. It had a big impact on me that I interviewed nearly 100 people for the book from all over the world. And the last question I asked them was, if you could kind of, you know, reach through the book to my readers, I mean, not in a creepy way, in a helpful way, and you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be? And almost everyone used some form of the word consistency, tenacity, resilience. They lamented that people quit too soon. So I actually spend a lot of time in the book talking about this. It almost became the fifth element of the book. There are 4 parts of the book, but that almost became the fifth because consistency is so important. It's almost more important than authority or education or the big idea. Just hanging in there and being reliable and outlasting your competitors is important. And so I spent time in the book talking about, number 1, how important it is. Number 2, how do you know that it's working? How do you know if you need to adjust or quit? How do you measure that? I have a little system, you know, that's helped a lot of people to determine, keep on going, because I see the progress. Because on average, it took about 2.5 years for people's personal branding to really take off. I mean, there's like little elements of progress along the way, But around 30 months is when, on average, it really started to go. And it's hard to do something for 30 months without having a lot of reward right up front. But that's kind of the formula for how people have made it.
Mm. And a great example of that was actually, he's a friend of mine now, Pete Matthew, and he was speaking at the conference, and he does a podcast every week.
Yeah.
Now, he has really inspired me, and I'm in the process of setting up a podcast myself. But he has done that week in, week out. Sometimes he has guests, and sometimes it's his own content.
Yeah.
And he was telling me that he's now getting an inquiry every single day. And people, I'm sure I saw somewhere, I might have this wrong, but I'm sure it said it hit 1 million downloads last week.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I mean, Pete's done 200 shows.
Yeah.
You know, it's a huge accomplishment, but he's a perfect example, really, of how this works, because so let's kind of dissect Pete metaphorically as a great example, because Pete, he wasn't born as a leader. He wasn't born as the authority in his industry. He lives in where does he live? What's the name of that?
He lives down in Cornwall.
Yeah, right. He lives in a small fishing village in Cornwall that really has gone through a lot of bad economic times, and yet here he is living in this little fishing village, and he's known throughout the UK and now kind of throughout the world as this keen financial advisor. Okay, so he built it up over time. Now, the other interesting thing about Pete is, like all of us who have achieved, a certain amount of notoriety in our professions, it took time. It took. I mean, it was almost at the 2-year point before he got his first inquiry from one of his podcasts, and he did blogging for a while. He tried videos for a while, and then what really hit for him was the podcast. But it didn't hit until he became consistent and did it every single week. Now, the other interesting thing about Pete is what keeps him going is that for him, it's more than money. He told me, and this is in the book, he said, I didn't want to be a person that simply makes rich people richer. I wanted to make a dent in the world. I wanted to have an impact on the world. And that's his purpose. That drives him. That's part of what helps him be consistent and help him create, that podcast, even when he's feeling sick, even when he's feeling down, even when he's tired, because he knows people are paying attention and he's having an impact. So those are really all the elements that are important that I mentioned in the book, personified in Pete.
And I think there's something else really interesting about Pete in that, and my background is in financial services, so I've worked with a lot of financial advisors, and they'll say to me, well, we can't do videos, we can't do podcasts, we can't do any of that because compliance. But Pete does it compliantly.
Yeah. Right.
So he has, my strapline on all of my blogs and so on and so on is, find a way and be the very best you can be.
I love that. I love that.
And that is Pete, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I teach at a university in the New York City area, and I teach graduate studies, and a lot of the people who attend come from financial services, the insurance business, pharmaceutical. These are all regulated industries. And I get really frustrated when they try to start hiding behind that. And look, you've got to obey the law, of course. Rule number 1, don't go to jail. We don't want that to happen. But rule number 2 is figure it out. Yeah. Because if you don't figure it out, your competitors will. And stop using it as an excuse for not adapting and not changing and inactivity. I have a friend who's the president of a wealth management company, and he hired a lawyer for his marketing team.
Mm-hmm.
So he was able to, he was a content producing machine. They were able to get everything approved within 1 hour.
Yeah.
So look, if you have to have a lawyer on your marketing staff, or have a lawyer on retainer, or just educate yourself enough so that you don't get into trouble, do what you need to do. But that's where people are today. It's the number one online activity in the world, is consuming content on the internet.
Mm.
And if you're not there, you're not being competitive.
Absolutely. And I really admire Pete for the way he stepped into his, I don't really like to use this word, but I'm going to, stepped into his purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think a word that you used before was he knows why he's doing what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important too, to have that kind of inner desire to keep going, even when you don't want to keep going sometimes. I know, yeah. I mean, I refer to myself as when I was in financial services, I was like an evangelist, but I wasn't selling life assurance and pensions. I was selling that safety net,
yeah,
for businesses and individuals and families, so that financial safety net, if their income stopped for whatever reason, then they could still manage to pay their bills and so on and so forth. And the depth of that for me was, my father died when he was 52, and I still had brother and sister at home, and my mother struggled week in and week out. Mm. And now in the sales and marketing space, I still feel that sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Because my father also went bankrupt when I was 16, because he was expert at what he did, but he wasn't expert at bringing in clients. He wasn't expert at becoming known for what he did. And so
I like this phrase that you used, stepping into your purpose, because one of the myths and the mantras of the internet today is, follow your dream. Follow, if you can dream it, you can be it. And for you, when you were a little girl, you probably didn't dream of being a management consultant, a sales and marketing consultant. And when Pete was a little boy, his dream probably wasn't to be a wealth advisor on a podcast. I'm a digital marketing consultant and a teacher, but I love what I do. I have fun every day. And if you look at the research, the people who are most likely to fail, the businesses that are most likely to fail, are the ones who follow a dream without a plan. So that's really what this book is about, is please, 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 if you're going to start something new, if you want to be known in your field, before you start spending years of your life on this, read the book, have a plan. There's exercises through the whole book to help you focus on how to do this for you. And sometimes you do step into your purpose. Instead of following a dream, the dream follows you. I'm living my dream. I'm traveling all around the world. I'm meeting wonderful people like you. I mean, you and I probably, connected on social media. Maybe you're aware of me on social media. Then we met face to face, and that's led to this collaboration today. And you never know that will lead. But unless you take that first step, I never would have met you unless I started a blog.
Yes.
Think
that's
about
quite
that.
Right. Yeah.
I never would have had the opportunity in my life to meet you unless I was known. Why did I speak at that conference and not somebody else? Because I'm known and other people aren't. When you're known, that opens the doors. That gets the phone calls returned. That gets the invitations to speak, to lecture, to write, for a board position, for a better job, for better clients. The people that are known have a permanent and sustainable advantage over those who aren't. And I might argue it's the only thing you can carry with you through your career. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this is because I think about my business career. When I was a young man, this was before social media. starting out in business. How would I become known? I'd have to be in the newspaper. I'd have to be on television. Someone would have to choose me and say, we're going to feature this person a lot. How would that ever happen? But today, I don't have to wait. You don't have to wait. Your viewers today, they don't have to wait to be chosen. They can pick themselves. They can choose themselves and exert this power and influence that they have by following the path in this book, finding a way to create content that matters to people, being consistent, having a helpful attitude, and anybody has the opportunity to do it. Anybody has the power to do it. It's just a matter of having the choice, having the discipline, starting, and having the consistency to see it through and win.
And I think your point about having a plan is so, so important. The number of people, and I'm sure you'll find this too, who sort of have a little bit of a loose plan in their head. But there was, and I read this years ago, that there'd been some research done by Harvard Business School, and they looked at students who'd gone through and then set up their own business, and only 3% had a written plan. But
that's unbelievable.
But they earned more than the other 97% put together.
Wow.
So the importance of planning, and I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the ways of being able to create content and deliver it out, because we have more opportunity now than ever before.
Right.
When I first set up my own business in 2000, it literally was yellow. I did write a plan, but it was yellow pages and a telephone after I had listed the clients that I wanted to work with. And that there was a real big kind of commitment to it, because I was a single parent with 2 teenage children, and I'd left a big job as a direct sales director, regional sales director. And I literally went from boardroom to bedroom. And I mean, I give myself kittens now thinking about how on earth did you have the courage to do that then? But it was literally a list of who I wanted to do business with, companies who could pay and would pay, yellow pages, and a telephone.
Yeah.
Now the sky's the limit.
Yeah, sky's the limit. And an important point here is that once you start, you never really know what might happen. And when you do create this plan, it doesn't have to be perfect. It may not even be correct, because as you move down your path, you'll get feedback and you'll learn and you'll get better and you'll become more authoritative. Nobody starts as an authority, but your journey to be known is your path to be known is the journey you take to become the go-to person, to become the authority. So you can't overthink it either. The most important thing is to give it your best shot and start, and then learn and adjust, adapt and adopt along the way. But it's never going to get better. It's never going to get easier. It's never going to be more fun unless you begin and stick with it.
And many people will say to me, well, this all sounds very well, Dylis, but where do I find the time to do this? Because this sounds like a lot of work. And if I've got to wait 3 years, or did you say 30 months or 3 years?
Yeah, 30 months. Yeah.
30 months. If I have to wait 2.5 years.
On average.
I can't afford to do that. So they need to understand the benefits and how to plan this in. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one attitude is I can't afford that. Another attitude is I can't afford not to. One of the things, the approaches in my book, it's a very honest book. It's not a rah-rah cheerleading book. It's when something is hard to do, I say it's hard to do. If it takes time, I say it takes time. And that's one of the things I address very forthrightly, that I think one thing you need to think about is you need to assess, is this the right time in my life? It's perfectly fine, if you're taking care of a sick child or a sick parent, or you have, military duties where you've got to, be out of touch for periods of time. If you're trying to recover from some financial setback or something, it doesn't, just because everybody else is working on these things, it doesn't mean that you're not a worthy person and an amazing person. And maybe your time will be a year from now. So, I kind of let people off the hook to say, is this the right time for you? But then I say, well, you can't make excuses either. I mean, if this is the right time, well, then you've got to commit to it. And you need to plan for it. You need to set aside time. And, the people who are known have the same amount of time as you. So bottom line, it's not an issue of time. It's an issue of priority. So, I learned long ago, you can either be a content creator or you can watch TV. You probably can't do both. And so, I have a great life. I feel like I have a very balanced life. I enjoy the outdoors. I go on vacations. I love spending time with friends and family. But I also am very focused. I'm very disciplined on what I do and how I create content. And so, you've got to make that part of your routine. You've got to plan for this activity just like you would plan for anything else in your life. You've got to set aside a little bit of time. And I also think that there are a lot of options out there where it may not take as much time as you think. And I had an experience this week where I was working with an executive from a Fortune, 100 company. And she went through one of my training classes, and she was really excited about doing this. And she has lots of goals in her life, and she knows that she could benefit from being known. And she just said, gosh, when it comes to this part about creating content, I just don't think I can do it. I mean, I've got this going on. And I said, well, maybe it's not the right time, but here's something to think about. Instead of blogging or creating a podcast, what if you did short videos, 3-minute videos that you would post every week? Doesn't have to be Hollywood. You get out your smartphone, you talk about something, you make an observation, you express an idea, you help people with a problem, you teach a little lesson in 3 minutes. One take, boom, do it on your smartphone, post it to YouTube, embed it in a blog post. That may take 10 minutes to do. And I said, in an hour, you could record, if you wanted to post once a week, in an hour, you could record 6 weeks at least of videos if you had the ideas of what you wanted to do. And she just like flipped around. It was like, oh, that's very doable. That's something I can do. She became energized. She said, yes, okay, I get it now. I could do that. So, and even blogging, it doesn't have to be a PhD thesis. People often make it way harder than it really is. All you need to do is write a 500-word essay on something that's interesting to you, something that's relevant to the readers who you want to be your client someday. I mean, a 500-word essay, that's 1 page double spaced. I could do that 10 minutes before class, right?
But you're Mark Schaefer.
No, you probably could too. But
yes, probably could in half.
Could you just have to frame it. Can I write a 500-word essay every week? Most people, that's kind of doable. And you get better over time. It gets faster over time. It gets easier over time. So,
and of course, your book talks about this as well in terms of creating content, and you don't just have to. You don't have to be a creator. You can curate other people's content.
Yes, right. That's another very, very effective opportunity to help people by highlighting the best content in the field and summarizing the best ideas, the best news in your field in a wise way. That's an excellent way to become known.
Mm. And actually, even this, Mark, this interview that I'm doing here,
Right.
I'll have this transcribed. I have a lady on Fiverr.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone who hasn't heard of Fiverr, that's Fiverr, and you can get someone to transcribe for next to nothing. So they will transcribe for me, and then this video will go up on YouTube. I will send this out as an audio to my subscribers, and then I can take pieces out of the transcription, and that can become a blog. So there are many ways of being able to do, just repurpose what you do. Because you mentioned that in your book too, about repurposing, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you're being a good role model in that regard, because the content we're creating through this interview, I mean, if you had to write that number of words, it would take a long time. So just talking to somebody like this and then having it transcribed is very efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about videos, and it was it Chris Ducker, one of the first speakers at the conference that we were at, and he was talking about in 2020, 90% of content will be consumed via video.
I don't agree. I don't agree.
You don't agree with that?
No.
Give us your take on that, then, Mark. That's interesting.
No, I don't agree with that at all. And because what people are doing is they're seeing that the amount of content production is going up. So they say, okay, well, that's the trend. It's going to keep going. And the content production, that the amount of content on the web 90% might be video, but that doesn't mean 90% is going to be consumed. So let me explain why. I have a very good friend, and he was telling me that he and his son are both sports fanatics. And every day they'll get up at breakfast and they'll consume the news about their favorite sports team that day. He said, my son will pull up, some sports channel or YouTube, and he'll be watching videos about the game. He said, I'll pull up newspapers. I'll be reading news stories. I would never watch videos about the game. He would never read about the game. And the reason is that people learn in different ways. They learn by doing, they learn by reading, by listening, or by watching. And so there's kind of a distribution of how people consume content. And just because there's more video, that doesn't mean more people are going to consume video. I am not a video consumer by nature. I'm not a big podcast consumer by nature. I am a reader. I'm a reader and a writer. And blogging, a lot of people say, oh, is blogging dead? Blogging is only going to be dead when people stop reading. So the reason that podcasts are growing and video is growing is because those have been underserved content forms. So people love to listen to things. They love to listen to things, at work or in their car or when they're working out. That's why podcasting is growing, because there's pent-up demand for podcasting. I mean, I don't see how you could say 90% of all the content consumed is going to be video when podcasting is growing double-digit a year too. That's not video. So I think there'll be some homeostasis eventually. There will be some evening out, and I think it'll generally align with people's psychological tendencies of how they consume content. If 1/3 of the people prefer to learn by reading, then 1/3 of the content consumed is going to be written. 1/3 is going to be audio. 1/3 is whatever the numbers are. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, but people learn in different ways, and I think that's kind of embedded in our DNA. Just because if there's more video, it doesn't mean we're going to change our psychological profile. So I don't agree with that statistic. And Mark Zuckerberg's been out there saying the same thing. Maybe that's where Chris got the number that by 2020, 90% of the content on Facebook is going to be video. That doesn't mean 90% of the content is consumed is going to be video. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, that's brilliant. And I love your take on that. That's really interesting. So if we just summarize this then. So do something that you love. Find something
right
to create content around something that you love. Have a plan. Find the time. Commit and be consistent. And don't give up.
It has to be something that you love, but there also has to be an audience that it matters to. That's why I, instead of saying follow your dream or following your passion, in my book, I talk about finding a sustainable interest. You do have to be interested in it because you're going to spend a lot of time with it. But it also has to be sustainable, meaning people want to pay you for what you do. I mean, if you're a listener of this episode, presumably you want to be paid someday for what you do, for leveraging your ability to be known. And so there's got to be an audience out there that cares about you and what you have to say. Otherwise, you'll never get the audience that will help you make your dreams come true, whatever those might be.
Perfect. So, Mark, where can people get in touch with you? Show us your book again. And I really do urge people to get this book. It is amazing. And I have to be very honest. I buy a lot of business books and I read a lot, but sometimes it takes me longer. Sometimes I don't even finish because I get bored. This has been gripping. I've loved it. I've loved the examples that you give in there. I like your own stories. I love the exercises that you give. It really is a wholesome book.
Thank you. Thank you.
So where do people find you, Mark?
Well, it's very easy to find me because I made the smart decision of not naming my website Schaefer because no one can spell Schaefer, but it's Businesses Grow. So if you can remember businessesgrow.com, you can find everything you need. You can find my books, my blog, my podcast called The Marketing Companion that I do with Tom Webster. It's absolutely hilarious and fun. And there's lots of free resources on Businesses Grow for businesses of every size. Excellent.
And your book, if you just hold it up again, Mark, just in case anyone wants to go directly to Amazon.
Known. And there's a workbook that goes with the book too. I don't have the workbook handy. But I'm a teacher in my heart, and I just believe in this so much. I know this is the way forward, and I didn't want anybody to have an excuse to not really follow through and do the exercises. And if you the book is fine on its own, but if you fill out the workbook if you fill out the workbook, you will have a plan. That is, you will have a way forward to be known in the world.
And they sit together on Amazon.
Yes.
So that's my next purchase. I didn't realize that I should have got that as well, but I should be ordering that today. Mark, thank you so much. It's been so insightful, and it's been a delight to speak to you.
Thank you so much. It's been fun.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.